We are officially on day 2 of Verdict Watch as the jury in the Kyle Rittenhouse case continues its deliberations. They resumed this morning at about 9 a.m. Central. And so they've been at it for about 2 hours now today, about 8 hours yesterday. Jury of 7 women, 5 men. So far, no verdict. The pressure on these 12 people is enormous and somewhat unfair. We're all called to serve as jurors. I remember when I went down to the New York City jury service, even they had a video there showing us that even Chief Justice John Roberts has to go through it. Can you imagine voir diring John Roberts? But it's everyone's civic duty. What case you get on, if you get on, it's largely beyond your control. These are not legal experts. These are regular Kenosha residents who are moms and dads and grandparents and so on, just like you. They have been asked to take their common sense into that undoubtedly drab deliberation room, typically stocked with little more than coffee, if that, and come to some sort of a decision in a case that has riveted and deeply divided the nation. I wish them luck and wisdom, and I'm praying for all of them. Unfortunately, that is not how everyone feels, as people are already amping up the pressure on this jury with totally irresponsible messaging in the press about how a not guilty verdict is essentially a vote for white supremacy, even though the men here that were shot were all white, as is the defendant. A week ago, the judge had to alert the jurors that someone was caught surreptitiously videotaping them, which is not allowed. He reassured the jury that the tape had been confiscated and deleted. The jury, which is not and has not been sequestered, is no doubt aware that some 500 National Guard troops have been placed on standby in Kenosha as a city on the edge awaits their decision. None of this is supposed to matter in deliberations, but these folks are only human, and it will matter. And their challenge is to decide the case on the law and the facts, irrespective of what may follow. It's good that the governor of Wisconsin, Democrat Tony Evers, is mobilizing the National Guard. It is also about 15 months too late. And as we wait for this verdict, it occurs to me that Governor Evers, President Biden, Vice President Harris, and the dishonest corporate media all have real responsibility for how we got here this day and for what unfolded in Kenosha in August of 2020. The events that landed Kyle Rittenhouse in this courtroom began on August 23rd, 2020, in a case not involving Rittenhouse at all. On that day, police were dispatched to the home of the on-again, off-again girlfriend of a Black Kenosha resident named Jacob Blake. The woman called 911 alleging that Blake had taken her keys and was refusing to give them back. The officers were informed that there was an outstanding warrant for Blake's arrest. Margot Cleveland, by the way, detailed this incident very well in a piece dated August 31st, 2020 in The Federalist. When the cops arrived, Blake struggled with them. 2 separate officers discharged their tasers at Jacob Blake, but failed to subdue him. The struggle continued as the officers tried to arrest him, but Blake broke free. Video of the incident captured someone yelling, "Get my son or get my gun," hard to tell which, and at that point, Blake walked over to the driver's side of the car, whose keys he had just apparently stolen, and which had his and his girlfriend's 3 children in it, ages 3, 5, and 8. Blake appears in the eyewitness video to have a knife, and the police are heard yelling, drop the knife, an eyewitness or earwitness testified accordingly. Blake did not comply. He then reached into his car, lunging forward as if to grab something the officers believed to be a weapon, and police opened fire, shooting him 7 times. This belief by the officers was entirely well-founded. He had fought with them. He had refused to comply with their lawful orders. He was armed. There was an outstanding warrant for his arrest for sexual assault. He had stolen his girlfriend's car keys and was about to get into a car with their children, armed with a knife. He was told to stop and he didn't. And the cops reasonably feared for their safety and for that of the children inside that car. The rush to judgment was mind-numbingly fast. The media, political leaders, and prominent cultural figures immediately pounced, eager to paint this, without knowing the facts, as yet another rogue cop out to kill, quote, an unarmed Black man.
A disturbing story out of Wisconsin. Yet another unarmed Black man shot.
Escalate to the point where an officer would get so close to a man, an unarmed man, and just begin shooting him.
Once again, a Black man, Jacob Blake, has been shot by the police in broad daylight with the whole world watching.
A black man, father of three, shot in the back at close range in front of his three children. He was unarmed.
What you're seeing behind me is one of multiple locations that have been burning in Kenosha, Wisconsin over the course of the night.
Kenosha is all of it. You just said not all of it is on fire.
Is that people have their lives in these businesses too.
We don't know what we paid for that.
You know, the man was going to his car. He didn't appear to be armed.
There was multiple moments where if they wanted to, they could have tackled him.
Based on what I've seen, it seems that the officer should be charged.
You know, I spoke to Jacob's mom and dad, sister, and other members of the family, and I told them justice must and will be done.
Wow. Joe Biden, looking to boost his campaign, weighed in too, as you just heard, in part. Here's more of the man then running to be president along with his number two. Does this strike you as responsible commentary?
What I saw in that video makes me sick, especially his children. It's horrible what they saw. Watching their father get shot. Like Gianna Floyd, they're asking why? Why daddy? Once again, a black man, Jacob Blake, has been shot by the police in broad daylight with the whole world watching. Put yourself in the shoes of every black father and black mother in this country and ask, is this what we want America to be?
I think we should let the judicial system work its way. I do think there's a minimum need to be charged, the officers.
I think that there should be a thorough investigation, and based on what I've seen, it seems that the officer should be charged. Everyone should be afforded due process. I agree with that completely. That is absolutely one of the important tenets of our system of justice. But here's the thing. In America, we know these cases keep happening. And we have had too many black men in America who have been the subject of this kind of conduct.
They should be charged. They should be charged. They don't know anything about the case, and they're saying that cop should be charged. Harris went on to visit Jacob Blake, a meeting in which she told him she was, quote, proud of him. A man who had resisted arrest, been non-compliant with police, was reported to have drawn a weapon on them, and who had fallen into the crosshairs of law enforcement in the first place for allegedly digitally raping his girlfriend while his very young son slept in the bed next to her. Proud? The governor of Wisconsin, today so eager to keep the peace, did nothing of the sort in the wake of this Jacob Blake shooting. Rather than calm tempers, he inflamed them. First, he tweeted out the following, quote, tonight, Jacob Blake was shot in the back multiple times in broad daylight in Kenosha, Wisconsin. While we do not have all of the details yet, what we know for certain is that he is not the first black man or person to have been shot or injured or mercilessly killed at the hands of individuals in law enforcement in our state or our country. No, we did not have all the details then. And noting that fact before passing premature judgment on this case did not excuse the governor's recklessness. The reason one should not comment or rush to judgment as a public official in a case like this is that they don't have all the facts, but they do have big platforms. Elected leaders in a position of authority have an obligation, a special obligation, to keep their mouths shut until the facts are known, to not stir the public pot in a brew that's already toxic. But this was an election year, and the evil orange man needed to be stopped, and George Floyd had been killed months earlier, and a narrative was unfolding in the country that was not to be questioned. Police are on the hunt to kill unarmed black men, and Jacob Blake was just the latest example. Except none of that is true. For the record, and for the umpteenth time, police make over 10 million arrests in this country a year. About 1,000 of those turn deadly. The vast majority of those shot to death by police are armed. About 40 are not. In 2019, according to the Washington Post, 14 of those who were unarmed and shot by police were black. 14. But what does unarmed even mean? Those cases involve situations where, for example, one man killed was choking the cop, and used his taser on the officer. A few tried to run cops over with their cars. A few were beating the cops when the cops opened fire. And in several of the cases, the cops actually did wind up facing criminal charges. So it's not as if there is never any accountability. Shout out to Matt Walsh at the Daily Wire, who's done a great job of detailing these cases. The point is, there is not and has not been in recent years anything approaching an epidemic of cops killing unarmed black men in the streets. In 2018, it was 23. In 2019, again, it was 14. Out of some 3 million black people arrested. That is 0.0004% of the black people arrested. But the public perception on this is insane. When surveyed by skeptic.com, 44% of liberals estimated the number of unarmed black men killed by police each year is over 1,000. It's 14. 8% of the very liberal believe that it's over 10,000. 10,000. Again, 14 is the truth. What a sad delusion. And what a dangerous one. The media stokes this fantasy by putting any police-involved shooting of a black man on loop, painting it as part of a long-standing pattern, and pushback on these falsehoods not allowed. Your humble correspondent reported early on in the Jacob Blake shooting that there were reports he was armed and had a knife. Whereupon the Twitter mob and dopes like Soledad O'Brien spent days calling me a racist for merely suggesting as much. Where's the curiosity? Where is even the attempt to be fair? Don't hold your breath. Not long thereafter, Jacob Blake himself went on national television and guess what? Admitted he had a knife.
I realized I had dropped my knife. I had a little pocket knife. So I picked it up after I got off of him because they tased me and I fell on top of him.
With an open knife in hand that Blake says fell out of his pocket, he walks around the front of the vehicle towards the driver's side door.
What are you thinking at that point? I'm not really worried. I'm walking away from them, so it's not like they're going to shoot me. I shouldn't have picked it up.
Right. Then he lunged into his car and he was shot. The Wisconsin Attorney General later declined to charge the cop who shot Blake, saying there was no way under these facts that criminal charges were appropriate, a conclusion seconded by Merrick Garland's DOJ. Where's that officer's apology? But none of this mattered. In August 2020, there was no willingness to wait for the facts. Instead, the mob, incited by a governor and corporate media desperate to prove their wokeness, and by a presidential candidate looking to stoke up racial animus amongst a Democrat base in which black votes are crucial, took to the streets of Kenosha, burning and looting away. And that is where Kyle Rittenhouse comes in. After days of watching Kenosha burn, a city in which his father and several other members of his family lived, then 17-year-old Rittenhouse decided to do something about the chaos. You see, the evening of Jacob Blake's shooting, Governor Evers did not call in the National Guard. He did not. Instead, he sent that absurd tweet I just read to you. Later that night, 100 cars were set on fire in Kenosha. There was rioting, looting. Several businesses were destroyed. But at least the governor felt good about his wokeness. The next day, Governor Evers finally did call up the Guard, 125 of them, to protect a city of 100,000. More arson and lawlessness that night, as criminals, styling themselves as Black Lives Matter protesters, took to the streets. By August 25th, 2020, the governor had called up another 125 guardsmen. Now that's a total of 250. Mind you, that's half of what he has called up already this week. But by that point, as John McCormick of National Review points out, law enforcement was totally overwhelmed by the rioters. The only visible police presence was around the Kenosha courthouse, where a fence went up about 8 feet tall, with about 1,000 protesters around it. This was the night Rittenhouse decided to try to protect Kenosha. With frustrations growing about their city burning and elected officials, not to mention the media, giving the rioters a total pass, many felt not enough was being done to keep the peace. Rittenhouse wanted to do something about it. Look, I've said before, I think this was the wrong move. He was not adequately trained or mature enough or the right man for the job. But I get it. Because law enforcement, as is often the case after the nation wrongly piles on, unfairly attacking a cop as racist, either wasn't able or wasn't willing to control the mob that week. Kyle grabbed an AR-15 and got himself in serious trouble. A man named Joseph Rosenbaum attacked him. So did Anthony Huber and Gage Grosskreutz, and he shot all three of them. And the first two are now dead. And before we knew it, the same cycle that poisoned the Jacob Blake case started again. Joe Biden weighing in, calling Kyle a white supremacist. Again, the rush to judgment. The media doing the same, calling him a domestic terrorist, calling him a vigilante over and over. But what if they got it wrong again? What if Kyle Rittenhouse did not break the law, but got himself in trouble trying to uphold it? What if this jury sees the truth on those videotapes and says Kyle Rittenhouse had a right to defend himself? Well, then we may see a repeat of August 2020, riots, looting, chaos, and zero accountability. By the way, not everyone is happy about the National Guard now coming in. Yesterday, Jacob Blake's uncle and other BLM protesters clashed with Rittenhouse supporters on the steps of the Rittenhouse courthouse. Blake's uncle was angry about the National Guard, told the New York Post the move proves Governor Evers is a coward and a racist. He says if the Guard is needed, it won't be to control the BLM crowd, it will be to control Rittenhouse's supporters. Quote, we'll be celebrating that somebody's going to jail, and they'll be quite upset. You see, the only just verdict in Rittenhouse, guilty. The National Guard keeps the peace, like the cops and Kyle, racist. And on the pernicious cycle goes, setting the nation up for more destruction and more division.